All right. Looks like we actually do have microphone readings this time, Joe. Yay! So we've actually got this figured out for a change, folks. We've tried a couple times now, but we're actually ready to go. So I'm Joe Brooks here with Joe Aldridge, and we're starting a little podcast called the Monday Night Joes, where we're going to talk about everything kind of our time frame of wrestling was 2012 to like the golden era was kind of when we really watched it, but we're going to dig into kind of the prequel as well as a lot of the stuff we did watch. So I know I'm kind of excited to get started. I'm going to hand it over to Joe for a second here.
Yeah, I'm good to go. I picked up, I don't know, I was like 10 or something around WrestleMania 6. I remember seeing commercials for Warrior Hogan. And yeah, and then sometime when I left the area, got in the military, I kind of stopped watching late 2000s. But still knew John Cena and yeah, all those guys. So yeah, why don't you go over what we're going to do for the show, Joe?
All right, so the first episode here, we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to start off with kind of our Mount Rushmore of the Territories era. The Territories era was everything up until like the mid 1980s is kind of when Vince McMahon kind of expanded nationally, when everything was regionally up to then. So everything kind of changed at that point. So we're going to talk about those guys that might be the top guys that they would look at if you looked back at that era, which really went from like the 1950s up to like the 1980s. Pretty good time. We're going to discuss a primetime wrestling episode. This is something that Joe Aldridge came up with, where he has the entire list of the WWE catalog, which includes a lot of the territories. That includes early WWF, includes WCW, ECW, pretty much everything the WF network had prior to this. So we picked an episode out, which is Primetime Wrestling from October 21st of 1986. And then we got our top 5 tag teams of the golden era that we're going to discuss. That was, and specifically for the WWF. I also thought that might be fun to have asked ChatGPT what they would have come up with for our list. So we'll compare their list to our list as we get into this, Joe. So why don't you go ahead and read off your fourth person on your Mount Rushmore?
All right. So the first through third were very, very easy for me, and then I had like 3-4 people. I just went back and forth and back and forth. I literally finally just picked about 30 minutes ago. My fourth person from the territory era is the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. I based my list on the criteria of if I watch them now in 2025, is it entertaining to me? So I didn't go by, how much draw they had. I didn't go by champions, any of that stuff. Just I decided I thought it'd be fun to do a list that way. So Dusty Rhodes came up through Florida, Georgia, and got into Jim Crockett Promotions in the 70s. By the kind of the heyday of the late 70s, early 80s of the territory era, he was really a national draw. I mean, even when he didn't have the NWA world title, he was still often put on tour to go from territory to territory to territory. And it was what I like about him, watching him in the late 70s, early 80s now, is that he's just different. A lot of those guys are the same. The baby faces have the same interview, the heels have the same yelling interview. Dusty Rhodes had this different persona. It was interesting, and he had his unique moves and stuff in the ring too. So he had it on both sides, behind the mic and in the ring. I found him to be pretty entertaining. So that's my fourth guy on the Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, I kind of went the same way. And I even factored in a little bit, was I entertained by them as I remember them at the end of the territory area? Because that was kind of rolled into the golden era where WCW had become Jim Crockett, had become WCW, and WWF was expanding a little bit. But I did have to factor in on my fourth guy on this list. I put him on there because I think he's a lot of fun, but he really only dominated one territory. So he didn't expand his territory, but man, was he a lot of fun. And then as we grew up with the Attitude Era, he was one of the voices of the Attitude Era. So like just the memories are there. Jerry the King Lawler, he was the top star in the Memphis territory for years and years and years. He could still probably be a top draw in Memphis if he could wrestle still. I believe he had health issues and had a stroke or something not too long ago. But he didn't travel territory to territory, so a lot of the other guys on my list, they were able to carry that championship, like you just mentioned with Dusty Rhodes, from Georgia to Florida, and they were recognized as the national champion despite going across different regions. He held 150 belts in his time in the territory of Memphis between heavyweight championship and tag team championships. I mean, that's just an insane. He was really one of the best heels of all time. If you look back and just look back at his thing, he's just a natural heel. He became the funny man with JR and everything. But I tell you what, nobody had the punch quite like Jerry Lawler. Even I watched him in the mid 80s, and when he came into the random Royal Rumbles, he still had that big old right hand. So I put Jerry the King Lawler as the fourth man on the Mount Rushmore.
All right. For my third, now I'm getting to the guys who were these three picks were easy for me. My third really got his big break in Mid-South after just doing some very, very local regional stuff. And then hung out there until minus some Japan obligatory Japan trips. He stayed there until Vince McMahon came calling. And that is one of the two greatest heels of all time. That's out of the Mid-South, Ted DiBiase. Yeah. He had it's hard to explain because in the ring, he didn't do anything significantly different, but it looked different. His suplexes looked different. He did have that cool, like, put his fist up by his face and then do that falling punch. Yeah. I loved it. But he was a heel who didn't yell on the mic, which was rare back then. And he had that kind of like cold, calculated. Yeah, he was smooth. Yeah, that's a good word. He was smooth. He was the leader of different, guys, usually in some sort of feud with JYD or whoever was, running the babyface at Mid-South. I know in the late 70s, and I'm not so sure if it ran into 80 or not, that he was a babyface for a little while, and I don't think it worked for him until he went heel. He played that role so well.
I mean, he even played that role like in life as well. I remember I was listening to one of JR's podcasts, and he got into stories about the territories because JR was involved in the territories. A lot of times he actually drove around, helped set up the rings and stuff like that, and did all the booking. Apparently, one of the wrestlers, DiBiase, was dating his daughter and wanted to go out and kill DiBiase. And he was trying to get like JR to drive the car or something along those lines, and he'd been drinking or something, I forget, and JR like was able to calm him down and all this stuff, but he was all fired up that DiBiase was dating his daughter. So apparently even in real life, DiBiase was just that kind of heel. So that was a good one. And that's good, Joe. I like that one. I went with a guy is my third on the thing. He was big time in all the territories. I liked him in the early 80s or mid 80s. He was the first king that I knew. He was just a badass dude, and that was Harley Race. And even going back to listening to some of the stories that JR talks about, I mean, the guy was a guy who after a match would have a scotch and a smoke and just still be ready to fight you in the street. So like, I just look at him as this brawler who was wearing that purple cape and purple crown when I was a kid. And I didn't know why he was the king, but he was badass. And he held the eight times he held the NWA championship. Like Dusty Rhodes, he carried it from place to place. He was kind of the mainstay champion in the St. Louis, Kansas City area, which was a big time territory at the time. He was he was just a tough dude. And he basically just promoted the NWA for as long as he could till the territory area ran out. And he was just kind of the face of so many territories and the champion. And he was just a tough dude. And, like I said, he didn't wrestle long into into that time frame that I was watching wrestling, but the few years that I do remember him, there was a battle royal he was in. He won. I know he won the initial King of the Ring before it was even a tournament thing. It was just something they did on like house show way back when. But he was the first King of the Ring champion, so it did carry over to the mainstream a little bit. But I do remember him fondly.
What's cool about Harley Race for me is my only memory was the tail end too, when he was King Harley Race, and I didn't know when I was a kid that he had been, an 8-time NWA world champion. Yeah, I didn't even really know about NWA. I just knew WWF and I knew WCW, and that was it. And then so it wasn't until later on in life I found out this guy was an absolute legend, and he also was one of the 3 or 4 names that I just toggled back and forth between to put in the end of my list. I ended up going with Dusty. But yeah, so Harley is in a class with Dusty and the next guy on my list as guys who in that late 70s, early 80s could travel nationally even when they weren't the heavyweight champion. And that leads into the third guy in that group is my number 2 and my other favorite all-time heel. I'm talking about Ric Flair, the Nature Boy. Got his big break early on in his training up in Minnesota, AWA. Was there for about 2 years, and then went down to Jim Crockett Promotions, Mid-Atlantic, and of course it's just history from there. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I made this list based off people that I can watch today and still be entertained by. And I mean, Ric Flair's was in 1982, was doing his funny falling in the ring. He's wooing. He's got the sunglasses. He went from the 70s to 2020s. Yeah, just incredible. I don't yeah, I mean, yeah, so he wrestled his first match in AWA in 72. 1972. That is crazy. Yep. And then headed to North Carolina, Flair Country in 74. I mean, there's so much to say about it. I just don't think there's, the guy could go national when he didn't have the belt, and he could, everybody when he was. I have to say, I don't find him that entertaining when he's a babyface in the 70s. He just does that sort of like Ricky Steamboat, calm, like, oh yeah, I really want to thank Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood for having my back the other day. And it's very boring. And then when they tell him to be bad, it just lights him up. And he's just, he's wooing, he's running his mouth, and coming up with all this cool, the strut. Yeah. And it just has that charisma. So yeah, he was number 2 on my mountain.
Number 2 for me was one you already had on your list as well. I went with Dusty Rhodes here. Like you mentioned, he was the national babyface back then. You look back at his matches, and he was having fun out there when other guys were being serious. He was, doing the hand jive, and he was wearing freaking polka dots, and he was just wild, and he was wild on the mic, and he carried it everywhere. And well, he wasn't a champion as many times as a lot of these other guys we've talked about. I remember him even later into the golden era and the era kind of before the attitude era. He was still wrestling, and he was entertaining me then. And every time he kind of randomly appeared throughout the rest of the years, I was always entertained by him. And, then the lineage from there has been some other entertaining wrestlers that have come out of that. But you can't, he was the baby face. If you booked him, you were going to sell out the arena because people wanted to see him. People heard about him. It was, yeah. So Dusty Rhodes is number 2 on that list for me.
Yeah, I agree with you all that. It was a complete sell. So to number 1, this is my George Washington on my mountain. This is, I mean, not just one of my favorite territory wrestlers, but just one of my favorite characters that any organization ever came up with. And that is out of his most famous for me, out of World Class Championship Wrestling, out of the Dallas Sportatorium, leader of the Fabulous Freebirds, Michael P.S. Hayes, an absolute chauvinistic piece of crap. And just, I can turn it on today and be as entertained as the turning on regular wrestling. He got his start kind of bouncing around a few different places, got his first big break in Mid-South, where him and Terry Gordy, who ended up being one of the one of the Freebird members. They won the Mid South Tag Team Championships 3 times, I believe, and then he got a call to go to WCCW and went on his own. Loved it so much he called back to Terry Gordy and to Buddy Roberts. Yep, and brought them along. And the problem was, at first though, they had the 3 most famous of the Von Erich boys, and even the dad Fritz was still involved. So they had 4 baby faces, and like Dallas friggin' loved the Von Erichs, like absolutely loved them, like they love high school football. And then they showed up with 3 more baby faces, the Fabulous Freebirds, and someone quickly got the idea, hey, let's turn the Freebirds against the Von Erichs. And then they started, I mean, they were one of the first promotions to do like personality, and so you had like Terry Gordy coming out of a dumpster, and Michael Hayes coming out of a broken window from a dilapidated house and stuff. And then Michael Hayes' wrestling wasn't anything special, but he never just wrestled. He always had a sideshow going on with someone outside the ring. I mean, he knew like where wrestling was going, like Vince McMahon did, like Hulk Hogan did. He knew where it was going, and he just like took it there in the 80s. And they even brought along, I don't know if he was ever considered an official member, but he was always with him, tagging with him, Jimmy Garvin, who's the stepson of Rugged Ronnie Garvin, even though they're only 9 years apart in age. Yep. So some cradle got robbed. I didn't take the time to look at that one up. But Jimmy Garvin was funny too. I mean, just this whole group was. I know my pick is Michael Hayes, but Jimmy Garvin would be tagging, and he had this. His girlfriend was his valet, and he'd just have his back to the ring, and he's like posing down for her, and she's jumping up and down. And I mean, it was a circus. It was a show, yeah. And they brought it. And Michael Hayes was the ringleader, of that show. So for me, obviously I like the heels. I found them funny. I think they're entertaining. But to me, he's just he was in a class in his own in that 1982 to 1984 period.
For me, I have to go with Ric Flair as the number 1 guy. I mean, just
your best woo.
Woo! Just unreal what he was able to do in the territories. He traveled everywhere: Jim Crockett, Florida, Mid-South, Kansas City, Puerto Rico, Japan. He was a 10-time NWA champion. He was always the top heel wherever he went. He was working the big match as the top heel, and he drew. And you know what? People didn't like him outside of the ring either, so he was a heel outside of the ring. Like, he was who he was at all times. And I mean, come on, it's Ric Flair. Woo! All right, so fairly similar top 4 here. Let's see what Chat GPT came up with. So Chat GPT has Ric Flair as number 1, Harley Race as number 2, Dusty Rhodes 3rd, Jerry Lawler 4th. Then he throws in honorable mentions of Jack Briscoe, Nick Bockwinkel, Terry Funk, Bruiser Brody, and Vern Gagne. Those guys are more specifically were dominant to the early territory eras, I would say. Outside of Terry Funk, I mean, had a legendary long career, just like Ric Flair did. Terry Funk honestly may still be wrestling. I don't know that anyone has stopped him from wrestling at any point yet. So that was good. So Joe, I think we should move on to our primetime wrestling review here. So I'm gonna lay out the first match, and then let you have some talking points on it here. I'll try to chime in with you. So first match of our night, as we get into the primetime wrestling preview, is Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby Brain Heenan, surrounded by all the greatest 1980s flexible toys you could have. Start discussing random things, because this show is kind of a pieced together show of 4 different house shows with different matches from different times. So it's hard to tell how long ago some of these matches were. But the opening match in this was the magnificent Don Morocco, who I remember losing in the first round of the tournament to somebody like Superstar Billy Graham, maybe. No, he was managed by Superstar, but he lost to someone in the first round of WrestleMania 4, one of our favorite WrestleManias that I'm sure we'll discuss at some point on one of our podcasts. He defeated Corporal Kirshner in this match. Kirshner was basically a patriotic kind of babyface, and Morocco, I think, was kind of a mid-card heel at this time. So why don't you start seeing what you saw in the match?
Yeah, Morocco's style for me was always a little bit slow in the ring. I did appreciate that even in the early '80s, on like WWF All Stars or All Star Wrestling, I did appreciate that he wasn't a yelling on the mic heel. He had the kind of like he was a surfer boy that he could get the fans in the early '80s. They used to chant "Beach Bum" when every time he was in the ring, stuff like that. But for me, just neither wrestler. And it's hard too because they didn't get on the mic. It's just cut to the match. Yeah. To me, it was for an '80s match. It was too typical. It was too slow. Um, and yeah, that was about all I had for it. I saw. I didn't know too much about Corporal Kushner before the match. I had to look him up a little bit. Saw that he wasn't around too much. Um, but when I saw that it was Don Morocco, I thought it was going to be a slow beat down, and that's what it was. Yeah. So that's what I got out of it.
Yeah, I mean, it was that typical match of that style. Morocco was kind of in the beginning. Kirshner, I believe, was out in front, excited, crowd into it. Little guy taking on the big guy. Eventually, Morocco, I think, threw him outside of the ring, where Mr. Fuji interfered at some point, because Fuji was just evil back then. I believe he hit him with the cane a couple times, and Morocco just kind of kept throwing him out there and then distracting the referee. So, and then eventually, it was just an overpowering thing. And Kirshner definitely had the crowd into it far more than Morocco. Morocco should have been better than he was. I mean, there was so much more potential there. In the end, of course, he's going to get the win here. He's the guy there that's more over, or they're trying to get more over. Second match of the night was one that I actually was looking forward to because one of my favorite wrestlers from this time frame is the JYD. So Junkyard Dog versus Greg the Hammer Valentine. This happened to be an Intercontinental title match in Boston, Massachusetts. Greg the Hammer Valentine was the defending champion. Ultimately, he came out with the belt in this one, but he didn't win the match. What do you think of this one, Joe?
Yeah, we talked about this before, and we had a good conversation about it. I'm going to speak to that a little bit. I think it is about as classic of a mid 1980s match that has transitioned to where Vince McMahon's wanting to take the company. It's about as classic of a 1980s match as you can get. For starters, you still have the completely taboo today race card where you have the black wrestler athlete who don't hit him in the head because that's going to hurt your hand. Don't headbutt him because that's going to hurt your head. And so JYD's playing that, and I'm like, yeah, I'm laughing. I'm laughing, thinking, oh my god, imagine if they pulled this out and on Netflix Monday Night Raw, in 2025. So I was enjoying that. Just that flashback to something I had kind of forgotten about. I did find it funny that when JYD tried to do like the face first fall headbutt, and Valentine moved, that hurt his head. Right. Yeah, but if you had connected, I think it would have been okay. Yeah. So yeah. Right, right. And then you had the sketchy pin where Valentine pins JYD, but the Mouth of the South is on the outside and he's holding down JYD's feet. And the referee stops just in time because he sees it, but the bell rings. There's confusion, right? We got the '80s drama. Valentine leaves because he's like, "No, I won the match. I'm not coming back in." He eventually gets counted out. So yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a mess. Yeah. And so he leaves. So it's totally typical. The heel kept the belt, but the babyface won. The crowd got to cheer, kind of thing. Yeah. So here you're the biggest JYD fan there is. So why don't you talk about it for a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, JYD is just one of the most over guys at that time. He people loved him. He wherever he went, people got excited for him. He had a great personality. His matches were exciting. The headbutting, getting on the ground and crawling around, headbutting people. He had great suplexes, other things. It was just exciting. And you always knew you were going to get a good performance out of him because the crowd was into it. So you always knew it was going to be a good match. And his tight set thump and stuff. I mean, the big old chain. It was just great. And in this case here, of course, you mentioned how he lost. and that's something that's kind of lost in more modern wrestling, is that heel manager. We talked about it with Mr. Fuji in the first match, and now it's Jimmy Hart in the second match. It was such a part of wrestling back then to have that heel manager, and those guys were great for 20 years. And I believe they even did it in the territory eras too. I think Jimmy Hart was part of Memphis wrestling with Jerry the King Lawler and stuff like that. I can't remember where Mr. Fuji was, but I know I've read his name as I've listened to a bunch of these podcasts and stuff like that. So yeah, so it was just really entertaining. I just love an old JYD match because it's just fun. It's fun in that era. The crowd's really into it. And in this case, of course, I'm watching it going, yeah, this is definitely Boston, because they used to throw stuff on the rink, on the court, everything. So good times. Third match of the night, SG Jones and Paul Roma versus the Menace and Jim Haley. So SG Jones and Paul Roma, of course, are going to win this match, as they are the only two actual wrestlers in this. The Menace and Jim Haley were just jobbers at that time, and probably bottom tier jobbers. I think Jim Haley started the match, then he made a tag to the Menace, and then the Menace got like his ass kicked for a little bit. And I remember Paul Roma and SG Jones just kind of tagging in and out, and just kind of. And I don't think either one of them ever got a bit above the mid card either. So nothing really there too exciting. Roma finishes the match with a big old power slam because he's the power dude. So, I mean, because this is kind of the era of, they're starting to get into the era of the giants, where you start seeing only the big muscular dudes are the champions, and it's harder for the smaller guys to get over. Now we're going to go on to the fourth match of the night, which I know is your favorite. Absolute favorite. I know you love this guy, Joe. So Nick Kaninsky defeated Steve Lombardi, or as you mentioned the last time, the Brooklyn Brawler. So I'm going to let you get all excited about Nick Kaninsky in this one.
All right, here's the most exciting thing I have to say about Nick Kaninsky. He fought the Brooklyn Brawler when he wasn't called the Brooklyn Brawler. So this is the son of a legend. So, you know, I guess it's probably rough to fill some shoes. I'm sure. And unfortunately, he just couldn't do it. He didn't last too long. He a lot like and I'm blanking on his first name now, but no, Bruno Sammartino's son.
Oh, I don't know either.
Yeah. So Nick Kaninsky had the same problem. He brought like a 70s slow wrestling without anything extra, nothing else at all, just good technical wrestling and moves to an era that was growing fast into entertainment. And even Bruno Sammartino would knee you in the corner, and then I mean he when he stomped you in the corner, it almost looked a little bit like Stone Cold. You know, even Bruno knew the fans wanted to see some bludgeon, not technical wrestling and arm bars and stuff like that, you know. And so yeah, Nick just you know, unfortunately for him, didn't have, you know, like a personality in the ring, and it looks like he must not have had one on the mic either, because he just didn't pan out. But I did see just this last week, I haven't checked it to verify it's actually true or not, but it was a post on Facebook from one of the wrestling groups that I follow that claims that the Brooklyn Brawler is the losingest wrestler in WWF history, with like 1,400 something losses. I'll double check that, and next episode I'll verify it. But yeah, or maybe he was the most successful, I guess, because if you lose that many times, you probably didn't last very long. You were a jobber, you know. Yeah, he was a lifer jobber. That doesn't happen. Yeah. And then
he's been a jobber for 30 years.
Yeah. Yep.
Put everybody else over. That's what his job is.
Yep. Well, I'll let you give all the accolades to Nick.
Oh, it was brutal, because like I was watching it, and like as they were going up there, I thought, okay, this guy looks like he could be athletic. He fit the build of the time that they were kind of trying to push, you know, athletic guy, muscular. But boy, there just wasn't anything there that made me go, oh, geez, I can't wait to see another match with this guy, or I want to go look up more about this guy. I only knew about his dad from having listened to some of these, you know, different podcasts that talk about the territories, because his dad was quite popular in the territories area. But this one, yeah, it didn't do much for me. So Nick Kaninsky goes ahead and gets the big W there, and we're going to move on from that one. So another segment that I just a little section I want to talk about is I mentioned to you, I want to mention where was JR? So as we mentioned earlier in talking about our wrestling career, basically the whole time we watched wrestling, and even while we weren't watching wrestling as it was developing in all these territories, JR was a huge part of this as the ring announcer and carrying the rings and all these other things and booking talent and everything. So we're going to just check where he was the same night that we're doing for like the night that we're talking about our show. So in this particular night, JR was at the Mid-South Wrestling in the Mid-South Coliseum in Memphis, Tennessee. He called the main event, which was a hospital elimination match, Joe. It was featuring Dirty Rhodes, Don Bass, Toho Yamamoto, Akio Sato, and Tarzan Goto. They beat Austin Idol, Tommy Rich, Jerry Lawler, Jeff, and Jerry Jarrett. Yeah, says Jerry Jarrett was another territory owner back then, and Jeff was. I actually just started listening to his podcast recently too, and he was like 18, 19 years old at this time. He like fresh out of like having played like freshman college basketball or something like that. So this is kind of funny that like I didn't really think of Jeff Jarrett as like that old young to be there, but yeah, he was definitely in the territory area as well. But yeah, his dad was a big owner of kind of what it ended up becoming Smoky Mountain Wrestling, that era or that region, I guess, is kind of where they were located, Tennessee and stuff. So yeah, that's where Jim Ross was on the night that we were talking about Nick Kaniski's greatness. All right. So now, Joe, this one is exciting because this is when we were 8, 9, 10 years old. These guys were larger than life superstars. They were characters at this time, like over the top, like just in your face, cool people. Or at least they seemed cool. Some of them seemed evil, demonic, whatever. So we're going to talk about the golden era of the WWF, which is 1982 to 1992 is what it's defined as. And we're just going to come out with our top 5 tag teams. Then we'll see what ChatGPT has for their top 5 tag teams in comparison. So why don't you go ahead and give us a start, Joe?
Yep. All right. So my number 5 is almost a bit of a cheat because this tag team existed mostly pre-Golden Era. However, they held the belts in 1983 for 252 days, and that is Afa and Sika, the Wild Samoans. So I threw them in mostly because the rest of my list is so mid and late Golden Era that I wanted to throw a bone to the early on. And when I looked through and I saw that the promotion allowed a heel tag team who didn't talk on the mic to hold the belts for 2/3, 3/4 of a year. Just spoke to their entertainment in the ring and their believability as an unbeatable team. They were managed by Lou Albano. Yeah. He always had the tag teams. Yeah, he was a tag team guy. Yeah. So and so he added all the entertainment that you needed. Yeah. So to me the Wild Samoans deserved a spot on the list, even though 2 of their 3 WWF Tag Team Championships were prior to. So I didn't speak about those. Just their third one was 1983.
Nice. Mine is my 5th one is just simply fond memories, highlights, them flying around the ring, bright colors, mullets, just like they technically won the championship one night. It wasn't recognized. They technically lost it again like the next night after a house show. I love the Rockers, man. Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty. When I was saying this is 8, 9, 10 years old. These guys were high flying. They worked the Giants. They were the guys that as a little kid, you're like, oh, look at that. That's so cool. They're so fast. You watch other sports and you see the fastness and stuff. So they were in 3 WrestleManias during their time frame, which was pretty much the only pay-per-view during those times. So I think maybe the last WrestleMania 5 might have been the first Survivor Series time frame. So, and actually I did write that there were 28 pay-per-views during the Golden Era, and they were in 11 of those. So they were in 40% of those pay-per-views. They were always in the main events. And man, they were fun. Shawn Michaels was just always an entertainer. I know they ended up fighting, and Piper's Pit was a huge breakup, and ended up being this and that, and Marty Jannetty ended up not being anywhere near what Shawn Michaels was. But man, that's a fun time. So I put the Rockers fifth.
I have the Rockers as my first team off the list, and it was hard to leave them off. A lot of sentimental value for me with them as well. I remember me and my childhood friend pretending to be the Rockers and fighting my wrestling buddies, up in in the living room. And specifically, you were talking about the WrestleManias. One of them, I wish I could say which one it was right off the top of my head. They fought Bossman and Akeem, and it was just the coolest match ever. They were like, there was the first time I ever saw people doing high flying moves in tandem. So it was like if they were gonna do a double axe handle off the top rope to the outside of the ring, they both did it at the same time from opposite turnbuckle. So they both did body splashes in there. It was clearly, they weren't calling the match on the fly. They had planned it out ahead of time. It was super entertaining, and yeah, that's a great choice. The Rockers are just awesome. It was so different than everyone else. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they were new, they were young. So as a kid, it was just so easy to like them. Yeah. All right, my number 4 is the Legion of Doom. They were hard to put on the list only because they had one title in 91. It was 165 days. I think I put them on because of a little bit of sentimental value again, because of them as the Road Warriors, right? It was just, yeah, like
the whole era, they dominated. They
just
weren't in the WWF for that entire
exactly, yeah. So I know it was of the WWE golden era, but it was like they were so dominant and so popular that I knew who they were before they showed up to WWF. It was, yeah. So I put them in, and I found out when I was doing my research for this, just a cool little brain teaser side note for anyone who likes like wrestling nerdism. So you had, when they came into the WWF, you had the Ultimate Warrior, and at the time, Kerry Von Erich wasn't going by the Texas Tornado; he was going by the Modern Day Warrior. And so Vince said, "You guys can't be the Road Warriors. I already got 2 Warriors. I didn't want 2. Definitely don't want 3." And so he had them change, and they came up with the Legion of Doom. Yeah. So that's where that came from. Yep. So that's a little brain candy there.
Yeah, I'll get to the Legion of Doom here in a little bit as well. But yeah, they were so good for that whole time frame. So if this was looking at all tag teams covering all promotions from this 10-year era, it'd be hard pressed not to have them top 2, top 3. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So my 4th here is the Nasty Boys. They were short lived also, 1990 to 93. But they were the punk rock, just kind of also neon colors of the time, like that early 90s time frame. They won a championship. They went to the WrestleMania. I don't know. I just remember them very fondly of that time frame, being just kind of that first, like, holy shit, look at this team. Like, I don't know what they're going to do out there. And that was kind of fun in their experience. And I know it was short lived, but I liked the Nasty Boys in that one.
Yeah, they were good in that era where they tuned it back after the steroid scandal and stuff, and they were kind of like, they were still good at being bad guys while also being cartoonish, and like they did the armpit thing, like rubbing the armpit. Even even my mom, who was like, this like conservative Christian lady, would be laughing at it and entertained by it. It was, they handled it just right. Yeah. All right, this next one I think is a good one to be on the list. My number 3 is the British Bulldogs. I was surprised when I did my research to find out that they only ever had the belt once. It was close to a year, and it was also earlier than I would have suspected. They won it in WrestleMania 2, and yep, when they came down. Interestingly enough, Vince got the Hart Foundation and the British Bulldogs in the same deal with Stu Hart. Yeah. Yep. So yeah, British Bulldogs. I mean, there's not what can you say? It was cool. The British music. They had the dog. They're the with yeah. Bobby Heenan had the dog suit on. Yeah, classic stuff. It was just cool, and they were as you've said a couple times this episode. They were especially David Boy Smith was just a large, just a big dude, and but still athletic. And so that was fun to watch. A lot of power slam stuff like that, but catching people out of the air and stuff. So yeah, just a great tag team, entertaining, and to have the belt put on them for almost a year when in an era that also had like all these other great tag teams. It just speaks to how how what their value was.
They were my first team off though. They didn't quite make my cut, but they were a lot of fun, and I enjoyed even watching Davey Boy Smith later on in the Attitude Era when he came back and had a few matches there. He always entertained me. I went with the Road Warriors / Legion of Doom as my third team. They were only in the golden era with the WWF for a short time, like basically 2 years. They won the championship twice in 2 years. They were both WrestleManias. There were only 28 pay-per-views during that 10-year time frame. They were in 7 of them, despite being there for 2 years. So like every main performance during that 2 years, they were there, and they were already over when they came over. So like it was the aura that they brought with them and everything else, and just the spikes, and yeah, I mean, short time frame, but so memorable, you can't not have them on the list. So I went with the Legion of Doom with my third team. Just basically the same stuff you spoke about. They were exciting, they scared you, they came out of nowhere. I wish they'd been with the WWF a little sooner, but I do remember watching them on Turner Broadcasting on WCW as well. So it's not like I didn't know who they were. So, but yeah, Road Warriors number 3.
Yeah, an absolute great team. So my number 2, I hinted at when I was talking about the British Bulldogs. My number 3 came to the WWF with them, and that's the Hart Foundation. I have them as a two-time champions in 87 and 90. Combined 483 days, 274 the first, 209, and the 1990 SummerSlam is when they won their second title, and that was over Demolition. So up against I think ending Demolition's maybe their third reign. I can't remember. And the thing that I loved about the Hart Foundation was Bret Hart, because you take the Legion of Doom, you take the Steiners, you take the British Bulldogs, you take Demolition. All those guys are big, right? And they had the Anvil. He was big. He satisfied that role. But then you had Bret Hart. So there was like a little variety there. He was coming off the second turnbuckle with his knee or his elbow, stuff like that. And his thing was like his technical excellence, right? His excellence of execution. And yeah, and so that was cool to me, like that there was that element. It was just different from everything else that was going on, and that made it different is entertaining, or at least noteworthy. So yeah, and then of course being young with the cool sunglasses and the the pink and the black and stuff like that, they were obviously marketed to us at that time, when we were young kids. So yeah, and it worked for me. I enjoyed that team a lot.
Well, not much difference here. I put the Hart Foundation too. There's 6 years there. You mentioned it, 2-time champions. They were in the WWF for 6 years. They made 4 appearances as a team together in WrestleMania. They actually were in 5 total, because they were in WrestleMania 4's Battle Royal. Both of them were because Bret Hart won and was backstabbed by Bad News Brown. Then Bad News, he broke the trophy. Yeah. So kind of badass from the beginning for me. That might be my first Bret Hart memory, is that Battle Royal at WrestleMania 4. So from then on, I was kind of sold on him. Always taking off the cool sunglasses, handing him to a kid. The pink and black was just so different than everything else. And you talked about it. He wasn't a giant, but he beat up the giants, and he did it with his execution and shit. So it was just he was different. The Anvil was fun. Because he looked fun. He had a red goatee, and he was kind of like a ball of fire. But it was Bret the Hitman that kind of sold the whole team. But during that time frame, I mentioned a couple times, there were 28 total pay-per-views. These guys were in 12. So in 6 years out of 10, they appeared in more than anyone else. That was 40% of the pay-per-views at the time. So so they did significant damage in that time frame. Before I'm guessing 91 they more split up, because that's probably around the time Bret Hart became a singles champion. So that was a pretty dominant run for a 6-year period of time. You mentioned 483 days, so that's a year and a half of 6 years they were champion. They beat Demolition, who I is someone else I'm sure we're both about to talk about here. So I'll hand the mic back to you.
Yeah. Absolutely, man crush. Can't talk about it enough. Demolition, for a young kid in the 80s, was just the most. I mean, they wore black spiked masks and hoods, and then when they took them off, they had badass face paint underneath. They covered their face covering with a hood. And then they wore like the black spike stuff, which later on I was like kind of like a little erotic there, but as a 10-year-old, I didn't know, so it was it was perfect. It was just awesome. Yeah, right. Yeah, the leather chaps. So yeah, for me, I mean, just even though they didn't have that little guy, that smaller like Bret Hart guy, just their look, their brutality in the ring, the believability that they could beat anybody as heels and as baby faces. They were just absolutely entertaining. My favorite thing is when the guy's on all fours and he's giving them his back, and they stood on each side and they did the double. They each did a double axe handle pound, but they're jumping while they did it, and it's like 600 pounds a dude, like with the ring like bouncing, and it was just like, for an 8-year-old, that's kind of, it brings a little bit of awe, like, yeah, it was just a cool thing that they did that always stuck out in my memory. 3-time champions, like I said, with the Hart Foundation. In this time with these incredible tag teams, all of them can sell, all of them can draw. They put the belt over those 3 times on Demolition for 698 days.
Yeah, that's wild.
It's absolutely insane. And their first title reign was within 10 days of the Hart Foundation's combined title reign. 476, my eyes are terrible. 478 days was their first title. I mean, just insane. And the guys that they took the belts off were Strike Force, WrestleMania 4. Exactly, yep. And then the Brainbusters, when they came over from WCW, Tully Blanchard, and Bobby the Brain Heenan as the manager. And then the Colossal Connection at WrestleMania 6. Nope. Andre and Haku. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yep. So I don't know. I don't know if I did a good job explaining why I like him so much, but it was just, you can't put something like that out in the 1980s and not expect every kid under 10 to be like sold, Yeah. So that was my number one. There was no doubt about it when we decided to make this list that they were going to be there, and then I had to figure out the rest. So here, why don't you talk about? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So here, you talk about what they meant to you, Joe.
Yeah, it was just fun. They were a fun group, like you mentioned. I mean, it was Kiss with the coverings and everything else, and they were badass. And they were short term. They were only there 4 years. But 700 days as champions, like half the time they were in the WWF. So that's just absolutely wild. They appeared in 10 out of 28 pay-per-views over that time, so almost 40%, second to only the Hart Foundation. And the other reason I give them the lead over here, they didn't do anything as singles. They were purely a tag team, and that was it. And so that was kind of my oversell over the Hart Foundation with them, was that, Bret Hart did his own thing and was successful. Demolition was Demolition, and that was it. So that was kind of why I went with them.
And can I say one more thing? Yeah, I thought of this while you were talking about that being not never going to singles. They did draw 1 and 2 in a Royal Rumble, and they beat the snot out of each other for 2 minutes. They didn't just wait and team up. They just got in the ring and beat the crap out of each other, and then Andre came down. Right. Yeah.
But yeah, so I had just a couple of honorable mentions I want to throw out for this list. Money Inc. They only were there for like 2 years at the end of it, but they held the title for 2 times for 388 days. So like the last 2 years of this era, they dominated it. So that was a lot of they almost made the list. I mentioned my British Bulldogs didn't quite make it. The Natural Disasters. They were a fun team back then, Earthquake and Tycoon. And then the fabulous Rougeau brothers. While they didn't ever win the title, they were in every pay-per-view. So they were like the heel that lost to everybody. So they were actually in 32% of the pay-per-views during that era. So they were like longevity over time, just keep showing up and never quite getting over. So I enjoyed them.
Yeah, I had my honorable mention was the Rockers and Money Inc. as well. Like you said, Money Inc. just filled that tag team heel, and it sort of transitioned that kind of that gap near coming into the end of the golden era. They needed something in the tag team division, and they put Rotundo and DiBiase together, and it worked really, really well. And yeah, they, like you said, they had the 3 title reigns. I'm trying to think off the top of my head because I was looking them up. I think they took the title off of the Natural Disasters. 1, I think 2 off of the Nasty Boys, and I'm trying to think the third one was more old school, and it was like it might have been the Smash and Crush version of Demolition. Maybe I'm not. Yeah. I mean, that was yeah. No, me neither. Yeah, it was. You could, you had a good thing. They just couldn't extend it, and obviously they gave up on it pretty quickly. But yeah, Money Inc. was good. They had the WrestleMania 9, whichever one the Caesar's Palace was, against Hogan and Brutus. Good match. They're just they could literally, you could put anyone in the ring with those 2 guys, and I think they would have made a good match.
Yeah, it was fun. They were a fun group. All right, let's see what ChatGPT has. So ChatGPT has 5th, the Legion of Doom, 4th, the Rockers, 3rd, Demolition, 2nd, the Bulldogs, number 1, the Hart Foundation, with their honorable mentions of Strike Force, the Brain Busters, Money Inc., and the Mega Powers. But the Mega Powers they were one WrestleMania, and that, they had a couple matches here or there, but they were both singles guys. And I mean, the Mega Powers ended up being the Mega Powers Explode, so it wasn't even a long-term thing as a tag team between Hogan and Savage, because that WrestleMania 4 is kind of when it formed, and by WrestleMania 5 they were fighting. So, and it didn't even happen. Like, they didn't team up at WrestleMania 4; they just became friends when he helped Macho win the tournament. So it was like less than a year.
Yeah, so they tagged up at SummerSlam to fight DiBiase and Andre. DiBiase and somebody, and Andre. But you're right. And when you first said the Mega Powers, I thought, I can't remember what they were calling themselves. I think it was the Mega Maniacs or something. But that was Hogan and Brutus. I thought ChatGPT was trying to throw that on there as honorable mention. I was like, that was one match, yeah. But the Mega Powers were. Yeah, that might have been the only time that they wrestled together in that stretch. Yeah. So that's it. ChatGPT's off the AI list.
All right. Well, I think we made it through the first episode here, Joe. So we'll figure out what our next episode will be done. We'll pull up your computer list and figure out what next episode we're going to watch for primetime TV or other old school wrestling, or even new school, because it doesn't matter. You've got it all programmed into it. So it could be 1999 Royal Rumble. At some point, it might be kind of fun to talk about the Raw match we actually went to, because we could almost do like a watch back of it.
Yeah, maybe that should be the one that we watch.
And maybe we could see our friend Robbie Waters like we did while we were there. And maybe we can even hear your chant that you started with for Van Halen. Poison. Yes, because Bret Michaels was there in the front row behind the King and JR. So it might be fun to look back at that. So one of these we should schedule that one in as maybe like a rewatch or something, and have it on while we talk about it. Because it was a lot of fun to go. But yeah, so we'll figure out the next episode and we'll put it together, and probably the next week or two we'll get that up and we'll go from there. So hopefully you guys all like this, and we'll catch you on the flip side. For Joe Aldridge, I'm Joe Brooks. Thanks for joining us.
Woo! Nice.